James Madison was our smallest president. He was 5 foot 4 inches tall and just over 100 pounds. As one historian would say, he was soft spoken, he was losing his hair, he was short, skinny, and usually the smartest man in the room. He was born on March 16th, 1751, in Port Conway, Virginia. He was the oldest of 12 children, but only 6 would live to adulthood. Madison's father was a tobacco planter on a 5,000-acre plantation. In 1771, James Madison received his bachelor's degree from Princeton University, which was then called the College of New Jersey. After college, he returned to his family home called Montpelier and served as a teacher to his siblings. He still hadn't really decided his future direction in life. He studied law, but never finished the process to become a lawyer. In 1775, Madison was commissioned as a colonel in his local militia and was under the command of his father, James Madison Sr. However, Madison did not fight in any battles during the Revolutionary War. Madison became a close ally to the governor of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson. After the adoption of Virginia's first constitution in 1776, when he served in the House of Delegates. He also served on the committee of senior advisors to Thomas Jefferson until 1780, when he became the youngest member of the Second Continental Congress. Madison, along with Hamilton and John Jay, wrote a series of articles known as the Federalist Papers in their attempts to get the Constitution ratified. On June 25, 1788, the Constitution was ratified by a vote of 89 to 79. Madison, as a member of Congress, became a key advisor to George Washington. Madison was also a leading proponent of the Bill of Rights and attempted even to get it to apply to the states, although that attempt failed. Madison was a prominent leader of the Democratic Republicans. The Democratic Republicans favored a close relationship with France, and the Federalists wanted a closer relationship with Britain. Madison feared that what the Federalists really wanted was an authoritative government, as demonstrated by the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts. Madison wanted a free people's, a free society, but not a direct democracy. He feared the tyranny of the majority. If the majority were debtors, say, well, they might vote, the majority of them, not to have to pay back those debts. Madison also wanted to get a veto over the state governments for any law they passed. He felt that if the states got too far into debt, they might simply start printing money. He was also skeptical about paper money itself. He didn't have very much trust in it. In 1794, Madison married Dolly Payne Todd, a 26-year-old widow. Dolly would virtually become the hostess of Washington and was influential in promoting the future image of today what we refer to as the First Lady. Previously, Thomas Jefferson had even asked her to serve as his White House hostess during his administration, since Jefferson's wife had died before he took office. In 1799, Madison returned to the Virginia House of Delegates and campaigned for the election of Thomas Jefferson for president. In 1801, he became Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of State. In that same year, Madison's father died, and he would inherit Montpelier. In 1802, Jefferson and Madison sent Monroe to France in an attempt to purchase New Orleans, or at least some of the land around it, to ensure our access to the Mississippi River. Napoleon, needing the money due to his wars, offered to sell all the lands in America. Napoleon has given up his dreams of an American empire, especially after the slave revolt in Haiti. Thomas Jefferson would double the size of America due to this purchase. Due to the war in Europe, Britain began seizing our ships and forcing American crews to serve in the British Navy. This was called impressment. Britain was trying to block all trade to France. We had been in a quasi-war with France because they were attacking our ships in the Caribbean. And they were attacking our ships in the Caribbean because they thought we were favoring the British. They felt as if we were supporting the British through our trade with them during the war. They also felt betrayed since they had supported our revolution when we asked them for help. Madison felt that economic pressure was the best way to deal with the problem. Congress passed the Non-Importation Act, which banned most British exports to America. Congress then passed the Embargo Act of 1807. This act blocked all American exports to foreign nations. Later, this was modified to include only Britain and France. Jefferson hoped these acts would demonstrate to both Britain and France their dependency on America. These acts had severe negative effects on the economy of America and became hugely unpopular. The acts also did not have the intended effect on Britain or France that Jefferson had hoped. Like many embargoes, they did not have their intended effect. Products were still being sent by illegal means. The other problem was that many of these goods were available from South America or other countries. In effect, it was hurting Americans more than it was hurting the French or the British. Despite the unpopularity of these acts, Madison, representing the Democratic Republican Party, easily won the presidential election of 1808 with 122 electoral votes to Charles Pinckney's 47. The Federalist Party was rapidly becoming a regional party of the upper New England states. The harassment of American shipping did not stop despite increased negotiations. Most of Madison's first term was tied up with attempting to avoid a war with the British. Madison would win re-election in 1812 by receiving 128 electoral votes to DeWitt Clinton's 89. There was an atmosphere of war as the conflict with Britain was not going away. Beginning in February 1812, Madison devised a plan to pardon soldiers whom had deserted the military if they surrendered at a military base and resumed their full duties. It was thought that this was done in anticipation of an upcoming war with Britain. It was hopeful that not only would there be more soldiers available, but at least these soldiers had some sort of military training. On June 17, 1812, the Senate approved a declaration of war, which Madison signed the next day. The Senate passed the resolution 19-13. Most Americans thought it would be an easy and quick war. Thomas Jefferson said that conquering Canada would be a mere matter of marching. John Randolph, a congressman from Virginia, said it was to be a holiday campaign. After all, the U.S. had a population of over 7 million versus Canada's 500,000. Not to mention, Britain's main priority would certainly be their war with Napoleon. Either way, after 36 years of independence, we would again be fighting Britain, and Madison would become our first wartime president. However, things did not go the way the Americans had planned. The American soldiers were from militias, not very well trained, and little combat experience. The British troops were battle-tested and from a seasoned professional military. The British were also backed by multiple Indian tribes whom they had promised support in creating a separate Indian nation. America had a serious problem in their troop strength. America was relying on militias. Most militias were poorly trained, and many refused to serve outside of their state. Others refused to enter Canada. In addition, their pay was horrendous. In New England, the war was unpopular. New England refused to give money or send militia troops to help with the war. Britain, trying to divide America, Britain did not block any of the New England ports and encouraged smuggling. The war was fought from Detroit to coastal Maine, from Chesapeake to the Gulf of Mexico, from navigable inland waterways to open waters of the Atlantic. Just outside of Baltimore, the British Navy bombarded Fort McHenry. After seeing the American flag still flying over the fort, Francis Scott Key was inspired to write the Star-Spangled Banner. The song was first used by the Navy in 1889, and on March 3, 1931, the U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution making the song our official national anthem. President Herbert Hoover signed the bill into law. America took the opportunity to try to gain more land from Canada. America made several attempts to invade Canada, however, virtually all attempts failed. America sent 2,700 troops to invade Fort York, Canada, today's Toronto, and were successful against the 700 British and Indian troops defending it. Before fleeing, the British would ignite their armory, killing over 50 Americans and wounding 265. Among the Americans killed was General Zebulon Pike. This infuriated the American troops, who then sacked York by burning public buildings, businesses, homes, and even the Parliament. Later, the British would reciprocate when they entered Washington and set fire to the White House and the surrounding area. Ultimately, the battle produced no strategic gains, and the Americans would withdraw about a week later. However, it was a psychological victory for the Americans. The most famous battle to Americans is the Battle of New Orleans, fought on January 8, 1815. It was not known that a peace treaty had already been signed with Britain on December 24, 1814. Unfortunately, the battle was fought after a peace treaty with Britain had already been signed. Technically, however, it still needed Senate approval, and it was ratified by the Senate unanimously on February 16, 1815. In the Battle of New Orleans, 55 Americans would die, 185 were wounded, and 93 were missing. 386 British troops were killed and 1,521 wounded. 552 were missing. The War of 1812 was not a huge conflict. Approximately 2,200 soldiers died in action, 4,500 were wounded, and 5,200 would die of disease. In all, about 15,000 Americans died of all causes. In June 1815, the British defeated Napoleon at Waterloo, and their war with France was over. One of America's main grievances with the British was the impressment of our sailors and the seizing of our ships. Due to the lengthy time that communications took in those times, we did not know that a few days before we declared war on Britain, the British Parliament had rectified some of these grievances. The war changed Madison's view on several issues, particularly the need for a national bank, the need for a stronger military, and the need for the involvement of the federal government to help create roads and canals. James Madison helped found the Democratic Republican Party and successfully guided the country through the war with Britain. He would even ride out to the battlefield sites to give support. He was a successful two-term president and followed Washington's precedent in only serving 2 terms. He would be remembered most of all, however, for his tireless contributions to the Constitution of the United States and is considered the father of the Constitution. After Madison left office, he would help Jefferson form the University of Virginia. Madison was also obsessed with how he would be seen in history. He even went as far as to edit some of his letters he had written in an attempt to show himself in a better light. At one time, Madison was worth over $100 million in today's money. However, he would suffer financial problems towards the end of his life due to his stepson's physical irresponsibility and his stepson's mismanagement of the plantation. The tobacco prices were also on a decline, which did not help. James Madison died at his home in Montpelier on June 28, 1836. A few years later, his wife, Dolly Madison, would have to sell Montpelier to pay off debts. Congress even purchased some of the papers she had organized that her husband had kept to help her survive. Thanks for listening.